Doctors told the billionaire that his only child had 9 days left to live. No miracle, no treatment, just a countdown to the unthinkable. 9 days. 9 sunsets left to watch his little boy breathe. 9 mornings left to pretend hope still existed. 9 nights left to pray to a God who seemed to have stopped listening. But while Richard Hale, one of the wealthiest men in America, prepared to say goodbye, someone inside his mansion refused to accept the verdict. Someone everyone overlooked. Someone who had loved the boy quietly, fiercely, and without expecting anything in return. His maid. A soft-spoken woman who worked in silence. A woman who had rocked the toddler to sleep when nightmares came. Who knew which lullabies soothed him fastest. Who remembered every allergy, every fear, every smile. She refused to let him die. And the choice she made in secret, the rule she broke, the risk she took, would send shockwaves through the entire country. Before we go deeper, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like this story, and drop in the comments where you're watching from. This is one you won't forget. It began like a tiny scratch of trouble, so small no one paid attention. A little fatigue, a few strange bruises on the boy's legs, a fever that came and went without reason. Richard assumed it was normal childhood stuff. A bug from school, maybe a vitamin deficiency. Kids fall, kids bruise, right? But the symptoms didn't fade. They worsened. And after weeks of doctor's visits, endless scans, needles, blood work, the truth finally revealed itself. A truth cruel enough to crush a man. The billionaire's son, Leo, had a rare, savage illness, one so fast, so unpredictable, that specialists around the world couldn't offer anything except condolences. The diagnosis wasn't just bad, it was terminal. The news splintered Richard's world. He'd already buried one half of his heart, his wife, Elena, 3 years earlier. Losing his son, too, it felt like someone had reached inside his chest and torn him open again. He threw everything he had at the disease: money, connections, global experts, experimental treatments, therapies not even cleared for public use. He called hospitals in Switzerland, Israel, Singapore, flew in specialists from Germany and Japan, set up entire medical suites inside his mansion because Leo was too weak to travel anymore. Nothing helped. Every treatment only drained the little remaining strength from Leo's body. His hair thinned until it wasn't there at all. His skin turned so pale you could see the faint blue map of veins beneath. His lips cracked. His hands trembled when he lifted his toys. And still, amazingly, the boy didn't complain. Not once. He asked for bedtime stories. He drew pictures with shaky hands. He told knock-knock jokes that barely made sense anymore. He whispered, "Daddy, don't be sad," even when he struggled to breathe. The day the doctors said the words, "There's nothing else we can do," something inside Richard shattered. He stopped sleeping, stopped shaving, stopped speaking unless necessary. The mansion transformed into something between a palace and a private ICU. Machines beeped 24/7. IV bags hung from chrome poles like pale balloons. Nurses glided through the corridors like quiet shadows. The air smelled of antiseptic and heartbreak. And in the middle of that cold, sterile palace lay Leo. Small, brave, dying. Everyone tiptoed around him like he was made of glass. Except Rosa. Rosa Alvarez, the housemaid. She was 52, with calloused hands and tired eyes that had seen too much in life. She wasn't a nurse, not medically trained, not anyone special, at least not to the world, but she was special to Leo. She loved him. Truly. Deeply. The way a mother loves. She had been the first to hold him after his mother's funeral. She had been the one who wiped his tears when he asked where Mama had gone. She had taught him Spanish lullabies and braided little friendship bracelets with him during calmer days. To Leo, Rosa wasn't the maid. She was comfort. She was home. And she was the only person who noticed something the doctors missed. On the 4th day of the 9-day countdown, she saw it. A tiny shift in the boy's body, a symptom that didn't fit the diagnosis. Something small, something strange, but something important. She told the nurses. They dismissed her. She told the head doctor. He listened politely, then ignored her. She told Richard, but he barely heard her through the fog of grief. So Rosa watched and waited and realized the truth. They were treating the wrong illness, and if she didn't act, the boy she loved would die. She didn't have medical degrees, she didn't have authority, she didn't have power, but she had something stronger. Instinct, heart, and a memory. A devastating, painful memory of her own son, Miguel, who had died years ago from a rare infection misdiagnosed as leukemia. The same symptom Leo was showing now. The same pattern, the same tremor in the hands, the same faint discoloration under the nails. Rosa froze the second she recognized it. It felt like time stopped, like the air left the room, like the universe whispered, "Do something." Her hands shook as she removed the blanket from Leo's feet. There it was, the same spot, the same sign she had seen once before, on a hospital bed in East Los Angeles, next to a boy with her nose and her smile. Miguel, her baby, her heart. The world had failed him. She wouldn't let it fail Leo too. But to save him, she would have to break a rule. A big one. A dangerous one. A rule that could cost her everything. Her job, her freedom, even her life. Because the treatment for the illness she suspected was extremely risky, forbidden outside medical supervision, unapproved, and hidden behind legal walls so thick that even billionaires couldn't access it without clearance. She had seen it once, used it once, and never forgot. She knew it worked, she knew the danger, she knew the price, and she knew she had only 9 days, now 8, maybe less. Leo's breathing grew shallow, his heartbeat weakened, his eyes fluttered like a candle losing flame. The machines beeped with a steady warning tone. Nurses rushed in, the room filled with cold commands. Richard's voice broke with desperation. Please, please help him. But Rosa knew what the machines didn't. They were treating a ghost diagnosis, a name that didn't belong to the monster eating this child alive. She stood silently in the corner, hands clasped tightly, heart racing so fast she might faint. Leo looked at her. Just one glance. But it was enough. It wasn't a normal look. It was a plea. A child crying out without words. And in that moment, Rosa made her decision. A decision that would change everything. She would save him. Even if it meant losing everything, even if it meant breaking the law, even if it meant risking her life. Because sometimes the people with the least power carry the greatest courage. And what Rosa did next would shake the world to its core. It would ignite a medical scandal that powerful people wanted buried. It would turn a Maid into a legend. But most importantly, it would give Leo something no doctor offered. A fighting chance. And the countdown had just begun. Rosa didn't sleep that night. The mansion finally slipped into a heavy, exhausted silence. Nurses retreating to their cots. Richard pacing himself into numbness before collapsing on the couch in Leo's room. Machines humming in the dark like distant thunder. But Rosa remained awake. Sitting at the small wooden table in the servants' quarters, elbows on her knees, head in her trembling hands. A single lamp flickered overhead. Her heart pounded so violently, she feared the sound might wake the entire house. Everything inside her screamed, "Do something." Everything outside her said, "Don't even try." The treatment she remembered, the one that had once saved a child in her old neighborhood, wasn't just unapproved, it was illegal for use without special authorization. It carried risks that could scare even the bravest doctors away. It had been banned after a child reacted badly in a case unrelated to the illness Leo now showed signs of. But it had worked before, miraculously, undeniably. She remembered the boy from Boyle Heights, little Mateo Ruiz, whose mother had begged every doctor in the county to try it. They refused, said the therapy was experimental, dangerous, too unpredictable. Mateo's mother had cried nonstop for days, until one night Rosa, who had been cleaning a clinic at the time, overheard a nurse whisper that a doctor in East LA was still secretly using the treatment in rare cases. Rosa told Mateo's mother, and within weeks, Mateo recovered. It was the closest thing Rosa had ever seen to a miracle. But the doctor who administered it was forced to shut down afterward. Too risky. Too much legal scrutiny. Too many people calling it unethical. Yet, the treatment worked. Rosa stared at her trembling hands. She had tried everything to save her own son. Every cure, every supplement, every folk remedy, every doctor, every hospital. Miguel's illness had moved too fast, too silently. By the time someone realized it wasn't leukemia, it was too late. That memory still lived inside her ribs like a knife. She couldn't lose another child. Not Leo. She felt him slipping through her fingers like she once felt her boy slipping away in a cold hospital bed. "No," she whispered into the dim light. "Not again." A quiet knock startled her. She jerked upright, wiping her eyes. Mrs. Grace peeked in, the head housekeeper, her face etched with worry. "You're awake," she whispered. "I shouldn't be surprised." Rosa nodded silently. "Leo had another episode?" she asked. Mrs. Grace hesitated. "Yes," she said softly. "His oxygen dropped again around midnight. They stabilized him, but it's getting harder." Rosa felt her throat close. Grace stepped inside, shutting the door behind her. "You saw something today. Something the doctors didn't see." Rosa's eyes darted away. Grace continued. "You've been around sick kids. You've worked in clinics. You've raised children. You know something, don't you?" Rosa swallowed hard. "I'm not a doctor." "But you know something." The lamp buzzed low and shaky, filling the silence. Rosa's voice cracked. "I saw it before, years ago, in my son." Grace's breath hitched. Shock, sorrow, heartbreak all at once. "Miguel," she whispered. Rosa nodded. "I didn't recognize the pattern at first. I didn't want to. But when I removed Leo's blanket and saw the discoloration under his nails," her voice broke. "It was the same. Exactly the same." Grace stepped closer. "Then tell the doctors. I tried." Rosa's hands balled into fists. "They don't listen. They see a maid, not a person." Grace squeezed her shoulder gently. "You're not just anything, and they should listen." But Rosa shook her head. "They won't, and we don't have time." Grace's brows drew together. "What are you thinking?" she whispered. Rosa didn't answer directly, but something in her eyes, something fierce, determined, almost dangerous, made Grace inhale sharply. "No," she whispered. "Rosa, whatever you're planning, you could get fired. Worse, you could go to jail. If it were your child, would you let him die because of a rule?" She froze. Her eyes softened. Then she stepped back and said nothing else. Rosa understood. She wasn't going to stop her. Dawn crept over Beverly Hills in soft pink and gold, but inside the mansion, it felt like perpetual twilight. Nurses shuffled in and out of Leo's room. Richard stood at the foot of the bed, staring at his son with hollow eyes. Doctors whispered in corners. Rosa entered quietly. Leo lay motionless, his breathing shallow, eyelids fluttering. The boy who once ran through hallways laughing now barely had the strength to lift his hand. Rosa knelt beside him. "Buenos dias, mi ángel." She brushed a stray eyelash from his cheek. He didn't open his eyes, but his fingers curled faintly toward her voice. A nurse approached sharply. "You shouldn't be too close right now." Rosa looked up. "This helps him," she said simply. We're trying to keep things sterile." I said, "This helps him." The nurse stiffened, ready to respond, but Richard stepped toward them. "It's fine," he murmured. "Let her stay." His eyes were swollen, the skin beneath them bruised from days without sleep. "I don't know how to make this stop," he whispered, voice breaking. Rosa rose to her feet, meeting him softly. "No father should." He swallowed hard. "Do you think he's scared?" Rosa looked at the boy, so still, so fragile. "No," she said. "I think he's waiting." "For what?" Rosa hesitated. "For someone to fight for him." Their eyes met. Something in her gaze, something raw and certain, startled him. "What are you saying?" Rosa opened her mouth, then shut it, because if she told him the truth, that she believed the doctors were wrong, that she believed Leo's survival depended on a treatment no one had authorized, Richard would either call security or break down completely. She couldn't risk either, not yet. Instead, she said, "I need to take care of something today. I won't be here for a few hours." He blinked at her. "Rosa, we don't know how long he has left." A tear fell down her cheek. "That's why I have to go." He frowned confused, but he didn't stop her. By late morning, Rosa stood at the bus stop outside the gated community, clutching a worn canvas bag to her chest. She had packed lightly: a thermos, a notebook with Miguel's medical records, and a folded sheet of paper with the name and address of a man she hadn't seen in years, Dr. Adrian Vega, the only doctor she knew who had ever dared to administer the forbidden treatment. He had vanished after his clinic was shut down, but Rosa had heard rumors, whispers, that he still practiced in secret, treating low-income families who had nowhere else to go. Her hands shook as she stepped onto the bus, because this wasn't just a visit. She was going to beg him, to help a billionaire's child, to do the unthinkable, to risk everything, again. But she had already made her mind, because in 9 days, now 7, Leo would die, unless she did something impossible. As the bus pulled away, Rosa pressed her forehead against the window. "Please," she whispered into the glass, "let me reach him in time." She wasn't sure who she was talking to. God, fate, the universe, her son in heaven. But she prayed anyway, because the fight for Leo's life had just begun, and Rosa was ready to go to war. Maria barely slept that night. The house was silent, but her mind wasn't. It churned like a storm. Fear, determination, guilt, hope, all crashing into each other. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lao's tiny hand wrapped around her thumb, felt the heat of his fever, heard his faint breathing struggling to keep rhythm with life. She sat on her small bed, staring at the worn brown envelope hidden beneath her pillow, the envelope the old village healer had given her the night she fled her hometown. Inside it was her last connection to the place she'd run from, to the people she'd lost, to the knowledge she had sworn to bury forever. Knowledge she now feared she would need again. And using it meant danger. Real danger. The kind she thought she'd escaped. But Lao was out of time, and she couldn't watch him fade. She pressed her palms into her eyes, whispering shakily, "Please, please let me do this right." Down the hall, the grandfather clock struck 3. Lao stirred in his room, letting out a faint cough, weak, barely audible, but sharp enough to slice through her resolve. She stood. She couldn't hesitate anymore. Maria slipped quietly from her room, her slippers whispering across the cold marble floor.
The mansion was dim, lit only by the soft amber glow of night lamps. The nurses had retreated to their break room for the hour. They trusted Lau's machines to alert them. Maria checked on Lau first. He lay curled slightly on his side, his breathing shallow but steady. A small toy truck rested by his pillow. He'd clutched it earlier, refusing to let go because Mama Maria gave it to him last year on his birthday. He used to run around the garden with it, making engine noises and insisting he'd one day drive a real truck, because rich people's cars are boring. Maria smiled sadly. He hadn't run anywhere in months. She brushed a stray strand of hair from his forehead and whispered, "I'm going to help you, baby. I promise. Just hold on for me." Then she moved. She entered the storage room where the nurses kept medications. She didn't touch anything illegal, didn't steal drugs. She only grabbed some basic supplies: bandages, antiseptic, gloves, a small cooler. She packed everything silently, with the precision of someone who had done this before, long ago, in another life. A life that cost her everything. She was almost done when a sharp, deep voice cut the air behind her. "What the hell are you doing?" Maria froze. Her heart rocketed up into her throat. "Richard." He stood in the doorway, sleep-deprived, unshaven, his tie loose and shirt wrinkled. His eyes, usually guarded, were bloodshot, almost wild. This was not the polished billionaire the world knew. This was a father running on heartbreak and caffeine. Maria slowly turned to face him. I was just making sure the supplies were stocked," she lied, though even she could hear the tremor in her voice. Richard's eyes narrowed. "At 3 in the morning?" She couldn't answer. He stepped inside, towering over her, not threatening, just exhausted, angry, confused, desperate. "Maria, talk to me," he said softer now. "If something's wrong, tell me. If you see something I don't, tell me. I can't—" His voice broke. "I can't lose him." Maria swallowed hard. She wanted to tell him everything, wanted to confess the truth, beg him to trust her. But if he stopped her, Lau would die. And if he believed her, he would think she was insane. So she shook her head. "I'm just tired, sir. I didn't mean to worry you." He didn't look convinced, but he didn't push further. Instead, he rubbed his face with both hands and sighed heavily. "They said he might not make it through the week." His voice trembled. "Every time I close my eyes, I see him calling me daddy again, and I know he won't." Maria felt her chest crack open. "He will," she whispered. Richard laughed, a painful, bitter sound. "No, he won't. It's over, Maria. The world's best doctors have tried. The best equipment, the best researchers, the best drugs. Nothing. A miracle won't bring him back." Maria's eyes flickered, not with fear, but with fire. "You're wrong." She stared at him. For the first time, she looked right at him, not as his maid, not as an employee who needed to stay small and silent, but as a woman who refused to surrender. "You don't know everything the world has to offer," she said quietly. Something in her tone made him straighten, made his grief pause, made his mind latch on to her words. "Maria, what are you implying?" She broke the stare, slipped past him, and whispered, "Nothing, sir. Go rest. Lau needs your strength." Then she walked out, leaving him standing in the dim room, shaken, confused, and suspicious. Maria returned to her bedroom and locked the door. She took out the brown envelope. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a folded cloth pouch, worn with age and tied with a faded red string. She unwrapped it carefully, reverentially. Inside were tiny vials of herbs, powders, oils, strange ingredients that Western medicine would laugh at. But her people didn't laugh. Her grandmother used them to heal villagers when hospitals were days away. Her mother used them during floods when no doctor could reach them. Maria used them once before. for someone she loved. Someone she lost anyway. She sucked in a shaky breath. The memory stabbed, but she didn't push it away. She couldn't. Pain reminded her why she had to do better this time. She set the ingredients on the floor, lit a small candle, and kneeled. The ritual wasn't dark magic, nothing sinful or forbidden. It was ancient medicine, rooted in generations of knowledge, a mixture of herbal science, prayer, and spiritual connection. She began grinding the ingredients. The scent filled the room, sharp, earthy, powerful. As she worked, she whispered incantations under her breath. Not spells, prayers. Protect him, strengthen him, give me the courage to do what must be done. The mixture she created wasn't a cure, but it was a powerful immune stabilizer, something that, if prepared correctly, could buy time, days, maybe weeks. Enough time for her to make the next move. But the risk. If she administered it wrong, it could worsen Lau's condition. If she got caught, she would lose her job. If the wrong people found out she still had this knowledge, her breath hitched. Danger wasn't just a possibility, it was a promise. But when she thought of Lau, weak, fading, smiling through pain, fear lost. By dawn, the mixture was ready. She placed it in the small cooler. She whispered a final prayer, then she stood. This would only work if she administered it before doctors began their morning rounds. She walked towards Lau's room with her heartbeat pounding like a drum. But when she reached the door, she froze. Richard was inside, awake, holding Lau's hand, watching the boy's face as if memorizing every detail before the universe stole him away. He didn't notice her immediately, but when he did, his expression shifted. Suspicion, curiosity, something else.
Maria barely slept that night. The house was silent, but her mind wasn't. It churned like a storm, fear, determination, guilt, hope, all crashing into each other. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lau's tiny hand wrapped around her thumb, felt the heat of his fever, heard his faint breathing struggling to keep rhythm with life. She sat on her small bed, staring at the worn brown envelope hidden beneath her pillow, the envelope the old village healer had given her the night she fled her hometown. Inside it was her last connection to the place she'd run from, to the people she'd lost, to the knowledge she had sworn to bury forever. Knowledge she now feared she would need again. And using it meant danger. Real danger. The kind she thought she'd escaped. But Lau was out of time, and she couldn't watch him fade. She pressed her palms into her eyes, whispering shakily, "Please, please let me do this right." Down the hall the grandfather clock struck 3. Lau stirred in his room, letting out a faint cough, weak, barely audible, but sharp enough to slice through her resolve. She stood. She couldn't hesitate anymore. Maria slipped quietly from her room, her slippers whispering across the cold marble floor. The mansion was dim, lit only by the soft amber glow of night lamps. The nurses had retreated to their break room for the hour. They trusted Lau's machines to alert them. Maria checked on Lau first. He lay curled slightly on his side, his breathing shallow but steady. A small toy truck rested by his pillow. He'd clutched it earlier, refusing to let go because Mama Maria gave it to him last year on his birthday. He used to run around the garden with it, making engine noises and insisting he'd one day drive a real truck, because rich people cars are boring. Maria smiled sadly. He hadn't run anywhere in months. She brushed a stray strand of hair from his forehead and whispered, "I'm going to help you, baby. I promise. Just hold on for me." Then she moved. She entered the storage room where the nurses kept medications. She didn't touch anything illegal, didn't steal drugs. She only grabbed some basic supplies. Bandages, antiseptic, gloves, a small cooler. She packed everything silently,
with the precision of someone who had done this before, long ago, in another life, a life that cost her everything. She was almost done when a sharp, deep voice cut the air behind her. "What the hell are you doing?" Maria froze. Her heart rocketed up into her throat. Richard. He stood in the doorway, sleep-deprived, unshaven, his tie loose and shirt wrinkled. His eyes, usually guarded, were bloodshot, almost wild. This was not the polished billionaire the world knew. This was a father running on heartbreak and caffeine. Maria slowly turned to face him. I was just making sure the supplies were stocked," she lied, though even she could hear the tremor in her voice. Richard's eyes narrowed. "At 3 in the morning?" She couldn't answer. He stepped inside, towering over her. Not threatening, just exhausted, angry, confused, desperate. "Maria, talk to me," he said, softer now. "If something's wrong, tell me. If you see something I don't, tell me. I can't," his voice broke, "I can't lose him." Maria swallowed hard. She wanted to tell him everything, wanted to confess the truth, beg him to trust her. But if he stopped her, Lau would die. And if he believed her, he would think she was insane. So she shook her head. "I'm just tired, sir. I didn't mean to worry you." He didn't look convinced, but he didn't push further. Instead, he rubbed his face with both hands and sighed heavily. "They said he might not make it through the week." His voice trembled. "Every time I close my eyes, I see him calling me daddy again, and I know he won't." Maria felt her chest crack open. "He will," she whispered. Richard laughed, a painful, bitter sound. "No, he won't. It's over, Maria. The world's best doctors have tried. The best equipment, the best researchers, the best drugs. Nothing. A miracle won't bring him back." Maria's eyes flickered, not with fear, but with fire. "You're wrong." He stared at her. For the first time, she looked right at him, not as his maid, not as an employee who needed to stay small and silent, but as a woman who refused to surrender. "You don't know everything the world has to offer," she said quietly. Something in her tone made him straighten up, made his grief pause, made his mind latch onto her words. "Maria, what are you implying?" She broke the stare, slipped past him, and whispered, "Nothing, sir. Go rest. Lau needs your strength." Then she walked out, leaving him standing in the dim room, shaken, confused, and suspicious. Maria returned to her bedroom and locked the door. She took out the brown envelope. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a folded cloth pouch, worn with age and tied with a faded red string. She unwrapped it carefully, reverently. Inside were tiny vials of herbs, powders, oils, strange ingredients that Western medicine would laugh at. But her people didn't laugh. Her grandmother used them to heal villagers when hospitals were days away. Her mother used them during floods when no doctor could reach them. Maria used them once before, for someone she loved, someone she lost anyway. She sucked in a shaky breath. The memory stabbed, but she didn't push it away. She couldn't. Pain reminded her why she had to do better this time. She set the ingredients on the floor, lit a small candle, and kneeled. The ritual wasn't dark magic, nothing sinful or forbidden. It was ancient medicine, rooted in generations of knowledge, a mixture of herbal science, prayer, and spiritual connection. She began grinding the ingredients. The scent filled the room, sharp, earthy, powerful. As she worked, she whispered incantations under her breath, not spells, prayers. "Protect him, strengthen him, give me the courage to do what must be done." The mixture she created wasn't a cure, but it was a powerful immune stabilizer, something that, if prepared correctly, could buy time, days,
maybe weeks. Enough time for her to make the next move. But the risk. If she administered it wrong, it could worsen Lau's condition. If she got caught, she would lose her job. If the wrong people found out she still had this knowledge, her breath hitched. Danger wasn't just a possibility, it was a promise. But when she thought of Lau, weak, fading, smiling through pain, fear lost. By dawn, the mixture was ready. She placed it in the small cooler. She whispered a final prayer, then she stood. This would only work if she administered it before doctors began their morning rounds. She walked toward Lau's room with her heartbeat pounding like a drum. But when she reached the door, she froze. Richard was inside, awake, holding Lau's hand, watching the boy's face as if memorizing every detail before the universe stole him away. He didn't notice me immediately, but when he did, his expression shifted. Suspicion, curiosity, something else. "Maria," he said softly, "you're up early again." She clutched the cooler behind her skirt. He looked at me for a long time, too long, like he was trying to read my soul. Then he said something I didn't expect. You know something I don't?" My throat tightened. I opened my mouth, but before I could answer, Lau gasped. Then the monitor beeped. Once, twice, fast, irregular. Richard stood so suddenly his chair fell over. "Lau!" My heart dropped. This was it. His body was crashing. I didn't have hours anymore, not even minutes. I had seconds. I dropped the cooler on the floor, pushed past Richard, grabbed Lau's tiny hand, and whispered urgently, "Please hold on, baby. I'm right here." Richard's voice thundered behind me. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer, because for the first time, it was too late to hide what I was about to do, and far too late to stop.
Chaos erupted in the room, but to Maria, everything suddenly moved in slow motion. The monitors beeped faster. Lau's chest rose and fell in frightened, shallow pulls. His small fingers twitched weakly in her grasp. His lips parted as if he wanted to speak, but no sound came out. Richard lunged forward, grabbing the emergency button on the wall. "Nurses, now!" Maria's pulse thundered through her ears. She didn't have time. If the medical team rushed in, they would pull her away, stop her, treat her like a criminal, take Lau from her arms and watch him slip away while they followed protocol that wouldn't save him. She couldn't let that happen. Not when she held something, the only thing, that could stabilize his failing body, if only she could get it inside him before his organs crashed. "Step away from him!" Richard shouted, panic sharpening his voice into something almost violent. But Maria didn't move, not an inch. She opened the cooler with one hand, her fingers shaking, and pulled out a small vial. It glowed faintly amber in the morning light, earthy, raw, potent. A mixture that took generations to perfect and a lifetime of trauma for her to understand. Richard saw it and froze. "What the hell is that?" Maria didn't answer. She snapped the cap off with her thumb, her movements quick and practiced. The scent hit the air, strong, herbal, ancient. Lau whimpered, and that sound, that tiny, fading cry, broke something in her so deeply she felt the pain bloom in her chest like fire. "Forgive me," she whispered to him. "This might hurt." And then, with Richard shouting behind her, she administered the formula. She slipped the drop beneath Lau's tongue, massaging his throat to help him swallow. She worked with a calmness that didn't belong to someone terrified. It belonged to someone who had done this before. Someone who knew what she was doing. Richard grabbed her wrist. "What are you doing to my son?" But the vial was already empty. She met his eyes. "Saving him." Those two words froze the entire room. The nurses burst in behind them, 3 of them, wide-eyed and breathless, but even they stopped when they saw Richard gripping the maid like she had attacked Lau. For a moment, everything teetered on a knife's edge. Then Lau's body jerked. A violent shudder rolled through him, his back arching, his tiny lungs pulling in air with a wheeze so sharp it sliced through every heart in the room. Maria dropped to her knees beside the bed. "Breathe, baby, breathe." The nurses scrambled to check the monitors, hands flying over buttons and wires. One of the machines spiked, another steadied, another completely reset. "What's happening?" Richard demanded. But none of the medical staff could answer, because the numbers on the screen, numbers that had been dropping all week, were climbing. Not slowly, not gradually, rapidly. Lau's oxygen levels shot up by 5 points, then 10. His heartbeat steadied, his breathing deepened. The color, barely noticeable but unmistakably real, returned to his cheeks. Maria didn't move. She didn't celebrate. She didn't even exhale. She just watched him with terrified hope, whispering prayers under her breath in a language no one in the room recognized. The nurses looked at each other, lost. Richard looked at the monitors, then at Lau, then at Maria. "What did you do?" he demanded again, voice quieter now, but far more dangerous. Maria stood slowly, her hands trembling. "I can't tell you everything." His jaw clenched. "Maria, because if I do," she continued, her voice steadying, "I put him in danger, and myself." He stared at her, stunned. "Danger from who?" Her eyes flickered to the open doorway, then to the windows, then back to him. "From people you don't want to know." Silence fell like a curtain. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't exaggerated. It was the kind of silence that made a man's stomach drop. "Are you telling me," Richard said slowly, "that there are people out there who would harm my son because of what you just did?" Maria nodded once. "Yes." The nurses froze mid-motion. Richard's face drained of color. Lau let out a soft breath, and that sound snapped Richard back to reality. He rushed to his son's side, running a hand through his boy's hair. Lau's eyes fluttered open for half a second, just a sliver of hazy consciousness, but enough for Maria to see life returning where moments ago there were only fading shadows. "Maria," he whispered faintly, barely audible. She pressed her hand over her mouth to keep from crying. Richard looked at her over his son's shoulder. Something shifted in his expression. Not trust, not forgiveness, but something new. Fear. "Get out," he said quietly. Maria blinked. "Sir? Get out of this room now, before I say something I can't take back." The nurses looked conflicted, but no one argued. Maria stepped toward the door, every movement heavy, reluctant. Just before she left, Richard said without turning around, "When Lau stabilizes, we're going to talk." It wasn't a threat, it wasn't even anger. It was a promise, and Maria wasn't sure if it terrified her or relieved her. She stepped out into the hallway, her legs shaking beneath her. For the first time since the doctors had issued their countdown, she felt hope. Real hope. But that hope came wrapped in danger, and deep down she knew saving Lau's life wasn't the end of her battle. It was only the beginning.
The mansion felt different after what happened. Not calmer, not relieved. Tense, thick with the kind of fear that clings to walls and settles into silence. Everyone could feel it. The security guards stiffened whenever Maria worked past. The nurses avoided eye contact, whispering in tight circles when they thought she couldn't hear. Even the chef, normally warm and cheerful, scrambled to busy himself whenever she entered the kitchen. Maria wasn't surprised. News had spread. A maid, the maid, had given the billionaire's dying son a substance nobody could identify, and the child lived through the night because of it. But that wasn't what scared people. It was the fact that his vitals were improving. Too quickly. Too mysteriously. Too impossibly. That morning, as Maria made her way down the hallway, a pair of nurses paused mid-conversation. One of them, a younger woman with nervous eyes, watched her approach with a mix of curiosity and fear. "That's her," the other whispered, not quietly enough. Maria kept walking, but her chest tightened. She had never wanted attention, never wanted to be noticed. Attention was dangerous. Attention got people hurt. Attention was how her mother had died. But now it was too late. A billion-dollar house was watching her. Medical professionals were observing her like she was a threat. Cameras tracked her steps. Conversations hushed when she passed. And somewhere inside one of these rooms, the only person she cared about protecting was fighting for his life. Lau, her sweet, brave little boy. The child who clung to her like she was home. She reached his door, inhaled slowly, and stepped inside. The first thing she saw was Richard, still in yesterday's clothes, hair uncombed, dark circles beneath his eyes. He looked like he hadn't moved all night. The second thing she saw was Lau, sleeping, alive, breathing easily. His cheeks were less pale, his breathing steadier. His small hand rested on his chest, rising and falling with each soft inhale. Maria's breath caught. He seemed stronger. Tiny changes, but real. Richard didn't turn as she entered. He spoke quietly, eyes fixed on his son. They said he shouldn't have made it through the night. Maria stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know. They said his organs were failing, that we were already too late." She swallowed. "I know." She stopped a few feet away, unsure whether to move closer or retreat. Then Richard finally glanced at her. His expression didn't hold anger anymore, just exhaustion, confusion, and a gnawing, painful hope he was terrified to feel. "What did you give him?" he asked, voice rough. Maria looked down. "Something passed down in my family for generations." "That's not an answer." She shook her head. "It's the only one I can give." He stood slowly, stretching stiff muscles, and walked toward her until only a foot separated them. "Maria," he said quietly, "I am a desperate man. My son is dying, and I have resources, connections that can help if you just tell me what this is." Her eyes filled with fear. "Those resources," she whispered, "are exactly what I'm afraid of." He stiffened. Maria met his gaze, forcing herself to hold it. "You're used to living in a world where money buys everything, information, loyalty, silence. But where this formula comes from, money only brings danger, the kind you're not prepared for." "Danger from who?" he pressed. Maria's voice lowered. "People who would kill to keep it hidden." Richard stared, unsure whether to believe her, but he couldn't deny something undeniable. Lau was improving. Doctors had failed. Machines had failed. Millions of dollars in treatment had failed. But Maria, a maid with a cooler and a vial, had done something none of them could. "Even if I don't understand it, I can't ignore what's happening." He looked back at his son, voice trembling. "He's better." Relief flooded her chest, but it was short-lived, because when Richard turned to her again, the softness vanished. "Maria," he said firmly, "I need to know if this, whatever you gave him, will continue to help him." "It will, but it's not a cure, not on its own." His jaw tightened. "Explain." She hesitated. Her mother's voice whispered in her memory, "Never tell outsiders. They will twist what they don't understand." But she couldn't protect the secret forever, not when a child's life hung in the balance. "The formula stabilizes the blood. It slows the deterioration, gives his immune cells time to repair and multiply. But his body, his soul, they need something else too." Richard frowned. "Soul? It's complicated." "No," he said sharply. "Simple. You tell me what my son needs." Her voice cracked. "Connection, presence, stability. He needs to be held, to be loved, to be spoken to like he's still here, not like he's gone." He looked away. Guilt tightened his shoulders. Maria's heart twisted. She hadn't meant to hurt him, but she wasn't wrong either. He'd shut down when the doctors gave their countdown. His grief had swallowed him whole. He visited Lau, but he didn't hold him, didn't read to him, didn't talk to him. He'd been preparing for goodbye without realizing the boy could still hear everything. I thought, he bran, voice breaking, if I pulled back it would hurt less. It doesn't, Maria said gently. He nodded once, a tear sliding down his cheek, before he angrily brushed it away. Before he could speak again, the door burst open. Mrs. Grace rushed in, pale and shaking. "Sir, you need to see this," she gasped. "What now?" he stiffened. She held up a tablet with trembling hands. Maria stepped closer, confused. The screen displayed a news alert. "Billionaire Richard Hale's son in critical condition. Anonymous source claims strange treatment administered by staff." Maria's stomach dropped. Richard's face drained of color. "What the hell?" he whispered. Mrs. Grace scrolled down. New headlines flooded in. "Unlicensed substance given to dying child?" Sources say house employee acted without permission. Mysterious stranger seen entering Hale Mansion before security shut down perimeter. Maria's blood turned to ice. Someone had leaked it. Someone inside the house. Someone who had seen her. Richard's eyes snapped to her. "You didn't tell anyone." "No," she cried. "I swear no one." He believed her instantly. He didn't know why, but he did. Mrs. Grace lowered the tablet. "There's more," she whispered. "Sir, the board is calling. Investors, your lawyers, they want to know if you're allowing dangerous, unregulated folk medicine in the house." Richard swore under his breath. Maria felt her throat close. "This is my fault," she whispered. "No," he shook his head. "Someone is trying to sabotage us." He didn't say it lightly. He said it like a man who had enemies. Real ones. Maria's pulse pounded. "Sir," Mrs. Grace said tremulously, "security cameras caught a man leaving the property last night. We think he was the leak." Richard's expression hardened. "Get security, now." Then he turned to Maria. "You stay with Lau. Don't leave his side." She blinked. "But the staff." "I don't care about the staff," he snapped. "I care about my son. You saved him once. You might have to do it again." Maria nodded, her throat thick. She took her place beside the bed. Richard stormed out with Mrs. Grace. And for the first time since the diagnosis, Lau opened his eyes. Just barely. Just enough to see her. "Maria," he breathed. She leaned close, tears spilling. "I'm here, baby. I'm not going anywhere." He lifted his weak hand toward her. She took it, and as she held him, unaware of the danger closing in from every side, she whispered the truth she had never told anyone. "I'm going to protect you no matter what it costs me." She meant it, but she didn't know yet just how high that cost would be.
The backlash didn't arrive gradually. It came crashing down in a single morning. By sunrise, the Hale Mansion was no longer a home. It was a battlefield, and Maria was at the center of a war she had never asked to fight. The first sign of trouble was the sound of engines. Loud, aggressive, too many to count. Maria stood at Lau's bedside, humming softly as she held his tiny hand, when a distant roar made her flinch. "Maria," Lau whispered weakly, sensing her tension. "It's okay," she whispered back, brushing his forehead. "I'm not leaving you." But she was lying, not to him, but to herself. Whatever was happening outside wasn't okay, because the next moment Mrs. Grace burst through the doorway, breathless and pale. "They're here," she panted. "All of them." "Who?" Maria whispered, though she already knew the answer. "The press, reporters, cameramen, drones, protesters, Sir's business rivals, even activists claiming child abuse, unapproved treatments, medical neglect. It's a circus." Marina's stomach twisted. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. She'd only wanted to help a dying child.
Yet somehow she had become the face of a scandal threatening to tear apart one of the wealthiest families in the country. Mrs. Grace rushed to the window. When she pulled back the curtain, Maria's breath caught. The outside world had erupted. Cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters swarmed the gates, shoving mics into the faces of security guards. Satellite trucks blocked the entire street. Helicopters hovered overhead, their blades chopping the early morning air. And in the chaos, signs waved violently. "Stop unsafe treatments! Protect the child! Fire the maid! Investigate Richard Hale!" Maria stepped back, shaken. "They think I hurt him," she whispered. Mrs. Grace nodded grimly. "Someone wants it to look that way." Maria's hands trembled as she glanced at the sleeping boy. The improvement in his breathing was undeniable. His color better, his heartbeat steadier. None of them mattered. Not to a public hungry for blood, not to the powerful people watching from the shadows, not to the vultures who wanted Richard Hale ruined. Richard stormed into the room a second later, 2 security guards on his heels. "Grace, get every entrance sealed. Full lockdown. No staff leaves, no staff enters, and shut down every internal phone line. Someone inside is leaking information." "We're already on it, sir," she answered. Richard turned to Maria. "You need to stay hidden." She blinked. "Hidden? Why?" He rubbed a hand over his face. "Because the media thinks you poisoned him. They're calling you a fraud, a cultist, a danger to children." Her heart pounded. "But I didn't." "I know you didn't," his voice cracked. "But the world doesn't care about truth. They care about the story." She swallowed hard. "You said someone was sabotaging you. This is their doing, isn't it?" Richard hesitated, then nodded. "There are people who want me destroyed, competitors, investors who want control of my company, politicians angry I didn't donate to their campaigns." Maria's blood ran cold. "And they'll use a sick child to do it," he added, voice trembling with rage. The thought made Maria's skin crawl. A dying boy was being turned into a weapon, and she, the one who held him when no one else would, was being cast as a monster. Richard stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You are not safe, Maria. I don't know how far these people will go, but I do know they're willing to lie, manipulate, and threaten anyone who gets in their way." She looked at Lau, her throat tightening. "I'm not leaving him." Richard's jaw clenched. "I wasn't asking you to. I want you to stay with him. You're the only one he responds to." Her heart softened, but only for a second, because suddenly, bam! A violent pounding shook the front door downstairs. The sound echoed through the entire mansion like a thunderclap. Maria flinched. Mrs. Grace gasped. Richard's expression turned to stone. "What was that?" Maria whispered. "Police," Richard growled. "Police?" Maria choked out. Richard nodded. "Or people pretending to be police. Whoever leaked the information wants you detained, removed." Maria's pulse spiked in panic. "They're trying to get to me," she whispered. "No," Richard said firmly. "They're trying to get to him." He pointed at his son sleeping. "They want him taken into state custody, removed from my care." He swallowed hard. "If that happens, he won't survive." The truth hit Maria like a punch. If the state took Lau, he would lose access to everything, the formula, her care, even the stability he needed. He would die. Maria's fear morphed into something stronger. Determination. "What do we do?" she asked. Richard didn't hesitate. "You stay hidden. I'll stall them." "But why?" she whispered. "Why risk everything for me?" "For you?" he repeated, shaking his head. "Maria, this isn't about you." He looked at his son again. "It's about him. He came back from the edge because of you. If they remove you from this house, he loses the only thing keeping him alive." Something inside her fractured. The mansion shook again with violent pounding. Richard moved to the door. "Keep him close. Talk to him. Hold him. Do what you did last night. I'm not losing him." Maria nodded, her breath trembling. He left the room, and seconds later the hallway erupted with shouting. Maria scooped Lau into her arms, holding him gently, pressing her cheek to his forehead. Outside the door, raised voices, boots on tile, the sound of men arguing, the sound of Richard shouting orders, the sound of the world crashing into their lives. Inside the room, Maria rocking a fading boy as if her heartbeat alone could shield him. Lau stirred slightly, whispering weakly, "Maria." "I'm here," she whispered back. "I'm not going anywhere." Downstairs, someone screamed, "Search every room!" Maria's breath froze. Someone pounded up the stairs. Voices shouted orders, doors slammed open one by one. Then, footsteps stopped, right outside Lau's door. Maria clutched him tighter. The doorknob rattled. Someone tried to force it open. "Open up," a man barked. "We have authority to search the premises." Maria swallowed her scream, holding the fragile child protectively against her chest. The doorknob twisted again, harder, stronger. The hinges shook, but then a loud, furious voice tore through the hallway like thunder. "Touch that door again," Richard roared, "and I will end every career in this house." The pounding stopped. Silence. Maria exhaled shakily, her heart slamming in her chest. She didn't know how long Richard's protection would last. She didn't know who had betrayed them. She didn't know if the formula had made her a target, or if someone wanted to steal it. All she knew was this: the world was coming for her. The powerful wanted her gone, the vultures wanted her blamed, and enemies she hadn't yet seen were closing in fast. But as Lau pressed his tiny hand against her chest, Maria whispered a promise she had no idea how to keep. "I will save you, even if it destroys me." And someone outside the door heard her and smiled, because that was exactly what they were counting on.
The night after Lucia's arrest felt heavier than all the nights that came before it. Richard sat alone in his office, surrounded by the ghosts of decisions he could no longer justify. The fire in the marble fireplace crackled softly, sending shadows crawling up the walls like memories he was trying to outrun. His hands shook. He wasn't even sure if it was anger, guilt, or fear anymore. Maybe it was all of them. Everywhere he looked, he saw Lucia. Her apron hanging in the laundry room, her handwriting on the whiteboard where she wrote Lau's daily reminders, her favorite mug with the chipped rim sitting in the sink. Her absence was louder than her presence had ever been. But when he closed his eyes, he didn't see the quiet maid who worked in the background. He saw the woman who carried his son through hell and back, the woman who fought doctors, nature, and even death when he himself had given up. The woman who risked her life without hesitation because she loved Lau. Not for money, not for obligation, but with a love so fierce it frightened him. And he had thrown her into a cell. A cold one, a lonely one, without even listening. The guilt gnawed at him like something alive, something hungry. Richard leaned forward, elbows on his knees, rubbing his hands across his face as if he could scrape the shame off. He whispered into the empty room, "What have I done?" But no answer came, only the echo of his own voice. A knock interrupted the silence. Gentle at first, then firmer. Richard straightened. "Come in." Mrs. Wen, the head nurse, stepped inside, her expression stiff and unreadable. She held a thick stack of folders, Lau's medical charts, test results, and documented progress over the last 8 weeks. Her eyes were steady, but the tension in her shoulders revealed something else. She had been holding this in for too long. She said, "We need to talk." Richard frowned. "Is it about Lau?" "It's about the truth." She walked forward and placed the folders on his desk, flipping them open one by one. Pages filled the surface: scans, blood panels, doctor notes, Lucia's personal logs. She said, "Look at the dates." Richard scanned the pages. The changes in Lau's condition, the gradual disappearance of tumors, the regeneration of marrow, the metabolic increase, the return of healthy cells, all of it began weeks earlier than he remembered. She said, "In section C," pointing, "look here." There were entries written in neat, looping handwriting. Lucia's handwriting. Experimental herbal compounds, stabilizing response, fever following injection, dosage reduced, response improved. Each line punched him harder than the last. "You see," Mrs. Wen said quietly, "Lucia wasn't poisoning him, she was treating him." Richard swallowed hard. "But she never told me." "She did," the nurse replied. "You just didn't hear her." Something in him cracked. He remembered every moment Lucia tried to speak, every time she hesitated outside his door, every time she said, "There's something," and he cut her off because he was too busy grieving a son who wasn't even gone yet. But the nurse wasn't done. "This," she said, pulling out a final document, "is why she kept it quiet." Richard froze. The page wasn't a medical report. It was a threat. A typed letter, anonymous, cold. "If you value your job and your life, stop this treatment immediately. Do not tell the billionaire what you are doing. The formula belongs to us. You will hand it over or suffer the consequences." Richard's breath caught. She was being blackmailed? Mrs. Wen nodded. "And followed, and watched. She didn't go behind you because she wanted to. She did it because if she told you, they would have taken Lau and her." A sharp, furious heat shot through him. Someone threatened Lucia. Someone threatened his son. And he, the idiot, locked her up instead of protecting her. He whispered, "Why didn't she fight back?" The nurse said, "She did every single day. She kept him alive long enough for doctors to continue the treatment she started. She kept secrets because it was the only way to save him." Richard closed his eyes. He felt the shame seep in deeper, curling its fingers around his ribs. But then another emotion rose from beneath the guilt, stronger, hotter. Determination. He stood up abruptly, chair scraping across the floor. He said, "Get the car." Mrs. Wen blinked. "Sir?" "We're getting her out. Tonight." Cold air slapped his face the moment he stepped outside. The mansion's courtyard was dimly lit, the wind slicing through the trees like whispers he didn't want to hear. His driver rushed to open the door, but Richard waved him off and slid into the back seat with a kind of desperation he didn't even try to hide. The car sped towards the precinct. Every passing streetlight flickered across his face, sharp, accusing, relentless. He replayed everything in his head. Lucia holding Lau's hand during chemotherapy, Lucia carrying him when his legs gave out, Lucia humming lullabies when the machines beeped too loud, Lucia praying in corners, whispering, "Not him, take anything else but not him." He had trusted doctors who gave up. He had trusted a system built to profit from illness. But he didn't trust the one woman who brought his son back from the brink. The shame was suffocating. The fear of losing her was worse. When he arrived, Richard didn't wait for anyone. He stormed inside the station, his pace fast, breath sharp. The officer at the desk started to greet him, but Richard cut him off. "I want her released now." The officer blinked. "Sir, she's been detained under—" "I don't care," he snapped. "She's innocent. You arrested the one person who saved my son." The officer hesitated. "We follow procedure, then break it or I will break every connection this place has." His voice echoed across the station. A few officers exchanged looks, fearful ones. Within minutes, keys jingled, a door unlocked, a guard led him down a corridor with peeling paint and flickering lights. The air smelled faintly of bleach and something colder, loneliness. When he reached the final cell, he froze. Lucia was sitting on the cot, hands folded, eyes down, shoulders slumped. She looked small, too small for the woman who fought death itself. He stepped forward, but suddenly he couldn't speak. His throat tightened, words forming and collapsing before they could leave. She looked up slowly. Their eyes met. Pain hit him like a wave. She whispered one word, "Sir?" Not angry, not resentful, just confused. And that hurt even more. Richard stepped inside. His voice broke. "I was wrong." Lucia blinked, stunned. "I should have listened. I should have protected you. You saved my son and I put you in a cage." Tears slipped down her cheeks. She shook her head. "I only wanted him to live." "And he does," Richard said, "because of you." She buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. Richard stepped closer, hesitant, reverent, like he was approaching someone holy. When she looked up again, he said the words he should have said weeks ago. "I'm here to take you home." Lucia stared at him, disbelief slowly giving way to something softer, something fragile, hope.
And for the first time in a long time, Richard felt something inside him shift. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of the reckoning, and he would burn the world before he let anyone hurt her again.
The night Richard brought Lucia home, something in the mansion shifted. The walls felt warmer. The silence no longer sounded like mourning. Even the air seemed different, less suffocating, less heavy. Lucia stepped through the doorway with hesitant steps, as though she wasn't sure she was allowed to return. As if the house that had once been her whole world might reject her now. But it didn't. The moment she crossed the threshold, Lau's voice echoed from upstairs. "Lucia?" Small, weak, but bright, shockingly bright. She stiffened. Richard saw her eyes tremble, her breath hitch. "He's awake?" she whispered. "Awake," Richard said softly, "and asking for you." Lucia didn't wait for permission. She sprinted upstairs, her hair flying behind her, tears spilling freely, and Richard followed, heart hammering. When she reached Lau's room, she pushed open the door and froze. Lau was sitting up, blankets pooled around him like a tiny mountain. He looked fragile, yes, pale, yes, but alive. His eyes, those gentle brown eyes, lit up the second he saw her. "Lucia!" His voice cracked with joy. She cupped her hands over her mouth, sobbing as she rushed to his bedside. She fell to her knees, wrapping her arms around him with a tenderness that could break bone. "I'm here," she whispered into his hair. "I'm right here, little one." Richard watched, unable to breathe. Because in that moment, he understood something he should have realized long ago. Lucille wasn't his maid. She wasn't just an employee. She wasn't a background character in his life. She was family, and he had almost destroyed her. The guilt scraped across his heart, but there was no time to drown in it. Not now. Not after everything. He approached the bed slowly. Lau looked up at him, sleepy-eyed, but smiling. "Dad, Lucia came back." He sat beside him and brushed a hand through his hair. "She did," he said softly, "and she's never leaving again." Lucia looked up at him at those words. There was shock in her eyes, then gratitude, then something deeper, something she hid quickly before turning back to Lau. But the moment, the calm, the reunion, the fragile peace, didn't last, because peace never lasts in houses where the truth has been buried too long. The next morning, Richard received a call that cracked the illusion of safety in half. A distorted voice rasped through the phone. "You think you have won? Bring us the formula, or the boy's recovery ends today." Richard's blood turned to ice. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. He hung up slowly, his jaw tightening, the storm inside him growing teeth. Lucia was in the kitchen making a light broth for Lau, unaware of the danger. When he stepped in, she looked up, offering a timid smile. "Good morning, sir." He didn't answer that either. Instead, he stepped close enough for her to see the fear in his eyes. "They called." She stiffened. The ladle slipped from her fingers and clattered into the sink. "What did they say?" "That they want your formula, and that they'll come for Lau again." Her face paled. Her breath shook, but she didn't crumble. She straightened slowly, shoulders rising with a resolve he had never seen in anyone, doctor, nurse, or scientist. "They won't stop," she whispered. "Not until they own it. Not until they can sell it." Her next words were barely audible. "I never wanted it to be used like that." Richard stepped closer. "Then we stopped them." She blinked, stunned. "Sir, you can't fight something like this." "Lucia," he said, "I'm a billionaire with nothing left to lose.
I can fight anything." But she shook her head. "They're not just thieves. They're corporations, investors, black market labs, people who think human life is a price tag. They'll bury you before you get close. I don't care. They went after my son, they threatened you, they don't get to walk away." Lucia stared at him for a long moment, something like awe softening her features. "Then we do it together," she said. The decision was made, and the war that had been simmering beneath the surface finally rose to the light. Richard's private investigators tracked the origin of the threats to a biomedical corporation working in the shadows, Echelon Therapeutics. On the surface, they produced harmless supplements and wellness products. Behind the scenes, they trafficked in stolen research, failed cancer drugs, and experiments too unethical to ever reach the public eye. They knew about Lucia's formula, and they wanted it. "So they think they can take it from us," Richard said, pacing the study that night. He didn't plan a lawsuit. He planned a storm. Surveillance, financial tracing, leaked documents. He used every resource he had ever kept in reserve. But Lucia did something he didn't expect. She stepped forward one night with a small, leather-bound notebook. Old, worn, pages covered in her handwriting. "This is the formula," she said quietly. Richard froze. "You trust me with it?" She shook her head. "I trust you more than them." He opened it slowly, half expecting gold light to pour out. Instead, he found meticulous notes, measurements, plant properties, symptom logs, patterns she had discovered while caring for patients in her village long before she came to work for him. "You created this?" he asked, stunned. "No," she whispered. "Nature created it. I just listened." He felt it then, something between awe and humility. He had spent millions searching the world for cures. Lucia had spent her life noticing what the world overlooked. He closed the notebook carefully. "We'll use this, but not to make money." She nodded. "To save lives." "And," Richard added, "to destroy anyone who tried to hurt you." The reckoning began with a press conference that set the world on fire. Richard stood before cameras, Lucia beside him, trembling but unbroken. He exposed everything: the threats, the blackmail, the illegal attempts to steal Lucia's formula, the corruption in Echelon Therapeutics. And then he did what no billionaire had done before. He donated the formula. Not for profit, not for ownership. He released it freely to every medical researcher, every cancer research facility, every developing country that couldn't afford treatment. A weapon of greed became a cure of hope. The world erupted. Hospitals called it revolutionary, scientists called it miraculous, parents called it salvation. And Echelon? They crumbled overnight, devoured by investigations, scandals, arrests, and global fury. They tried to ruin Lucia. She destroyed them without lifting a finger. When the storm finally settled, Lau walked into the garden on shaking legs, first steps he had taken without assistance in months. Lucia was beside him, supporting him gently, smiling through tears. "You're getting stronger," she whispered. Lau looked up at her. "Because you saved me." She didn't answer, but her hand tightened around him. Richard watched from a distance, hands in his pockets, heart full in a way he had never known before. When Lucia looked over at him, he walked toward her slowly. "Lucia," he said softly. She met his eyes, cautiously, almost shyly. "There's something I need to say." She nodded but didn't speak. "You saved my son. Then you saved me." Her breath trembled. He stepped closer, the closest he had dared to stand. "And I want you to stay." She gasped. "Not as a maid, not as an employee." She exhaled, voice steady, sincere. "As part of our family." Her hand flew to her mouth, tears spilled freely, not of fear, not of exhaustion, but of belonging, of finally being seen. And for the first time since the nightmare began, Richard felt like the world was right again. Not because his son survived, not because justice was served, but because in the middle of chaos, betrayal, illness, and danger,
They had found each other, and that was the real miracle.